Hey guys, tonight we step onto a rutted track that smells of wet wool and wood smoke, where your breath hovers like a small ghost in the chill, and the moon turns puddles into bits of tarnished pewter. Your feet throb inside cracked shoes, your belly makes persuasive arguments, and the road ahead is a ribbon of doubt. You probably won't survive this in the sense that the first warm, safe corner we find is going to undo you like a knot in hot water. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing our midnight map light up. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. A wind-skimmed hill opens, and there hunched against the road like a kindly turtle sits a tiny roadside chapel. The door is barred for the night, but the stone porch is open, and the wooden benches are as inviting as law allows. You dip your fingers into the stoop, half ice and half faith, touch your forehead, and murmur to the saint in residence, "Help a traveler who has more blisters than blessings." The chapel smells of beeswax and old prayers, and that's already more comfortable than the ditch. You settle on the bench, shoulder to wall, cloak tucked under to guard against the stone's appetite for heat. Overhead, a timber creaks like a sleepy sparrow. At the edge of hearing, a spring trickles. Someone thoughtfully sited this place near water. So you refill your gourd and promise the saint a humble votive if your toes survive the night. Mainstream fact: along well-trodden routes, especially pilgrim roads, chapels and shrines were planted at intervals to steady souls and bodies. The porch, or lich gate, often doubled as a respectable, if drafty, refuge after dark. No one sells you a bed here. The saint doesn't check ID. You pull your bundle closer, gaggle the cloak around your knees, and inventory the porch like a field commander of naps. There's a bell rope hanging through a hole, a temptation to prank, but you are not trying to collect enemies before dawn. A small image of St. Christopher glares down, all muscles and river, a reminder that gazing upon him was said to guard against sudden death that day. You nod up at him with the diplomacy of a guest who intends to borrow the living room. Quirky tidbit: travelers sometimes left tiny wax tokens, feet, hands, even little stomachs for the body part that needed mercy. If you had spare wax, you could in theory commission a new set of arches for your abused souls. Tonight, you make do with gratitude and a plan to soak your socks at sunrise. The night is not quiet. Exactly. Mice conduct brisk commerce under the bench. A moth taps at the shuttered slit window like a very soft debt collector, and somewhere a fox says something that would be censored if foxes had editors. Your stomach contributes a solo, then graciously bows out. You wedge a folded cap under your cheek, and promise yourself you'll only sleep until the first bird audition. Joke 1. You tell yourself the bench is rustic ergonomic, which is medieval for it exists. Historians still argue whether church porches were routinely used as beds, or were more a safety valve for emergencies. Parishes differed by custom, and some locked everything after curfew like a nervous landlord. Still, your kind knows the etiquette. You don't light a fire. Smoke and sanctity mix badly. You keep your boots on less to keep toes warm than to discourage borrowing. And at dawn you move along, invisible as a good guest. You also leave something, if you can, a prayer, a coin the size of a sigh, or simply the courtesy of tidying the straw. You tilt your head back and read the timber scars in the dimness, like a fortune. Last year's repairs, smoke shadows from a priest's winter vigil, a mason's little fish scratched in the corner as a signature. Mainstream fact number 2, because the night is long, church porches weren't only for shelter. They were legal and social spaces where contracts were witnessed, marriages hand-fasted, and announcements bawled at market folk. Tomorrow, someone might swear an oath in the very square foot you're using for a pillow. It's community real estate, and tonight you're paying rent in silence. Your mind drifts to the road's other refuges. The places you'll angle for if the next chapel is shut. A hermit's cell with a charitable bench, a mutilated wayside cross whose base makes a windbreak, a village's covered lich gate that keeps both rain and mischief at bay. You remember someone swearing they slept inside a gigantic hollow oak with 2 other travelers and a dog that snored like a bellows. Historians still argue whether tales like that are exaggerations or just proof that fatigue is a master negotiator. You half smile. Joke too. If the dog paid part of the rent in warmth, you'd call that a fair tenancy. The cold works its slow arithmetic up your sleeves, so you shift, tuck, and coax a little warmth from friction and stubbornness. The floor's grit is a map of days, grains of road dust, flecks of soot, a dropped pea that's fossilized into philosophy. Someone scratched a fish, someone a heart, someone the 4-line grid of a Merrill's board. If you had a companion, you'd play. But tonight the board is only proof that other nights had time for games. You listen for the one sound that matters, footsteps that mean trouble. When a traveler stumps past, you still your breath. They do not turn in. Everyone is playing the same calculation. Risk, comfort, distance to the next roof. You think about sanctuary. Mainstream fact again. In parts of medieval Europe, a church offered limited protection to the accused, the right of sanctuary. Bought days of breathing room while the community decided what to do. That doesn't apply to you. Your crimes tonight are foot odor and optimism. But the idea that a threshold can hold back chaos wraps around your imagination like a second cloak. Joke 3. You make a mental note to tell your future grandchildren that a porch once saved you from a fatal attack by drizzle. Toward midnight, the wind shifts, pressing cool through the porch like a timid cat. You wake, doze again, time sliced into crumbs. A passing cloud extinguishes the moon. The spring keeps talking to itself. A candle stub inside must have burnt down earlier, because a faint sweet smoke threads out from the lintel. You want to believe that's the saint agreeing to the rental terms. Quirky tidbit to file for later. Some chapels kept a tiny reliquary of a local wonderworker enough to attract pilgrims with heavier purses than yours. You suspect most chapels refuse to attract rats with heavier appetites than yours. In the thin hour before dawn, birds rev vengeance. You sit up, alive, which is a victory, and flex your feet like stubborn hinges. You smooth the bench, shake crumbs from your cloak, for the mice to discuss at their morning meeting, and leave the porch as you found it. Except a little warmer from having held a human spine. The road looks less indifferent with the sky paling. You touch the stoop again, colder now. A blessing's teeth and thank the silent building that lets you be a small, harmless secret for a few hours. A chapel is not a bed, not really. It is a pause, it is enough. You shoulder your bundle. The first real work of the day is to find bread and a place to eat it without your fingers complaining. Far off, a cock braces his courage and delivers an opinion. Your stomach replies with a manifesto. There will be barns and stables in your near future. Warmth with a price tag of scent. Honest animal breath, like a friendly ghost. But for now, the saint has kept the draft mostly polite, and you step back onto the road with a little waxy hope stuck to your ribs. The door stays shut. The porch remembers nothing. The path remembers everything. You leave the chapel with morning thin as watered ale. Legs cranky, thoughts hopeful. The road hums with cartwheels and the quiet industry of people who would love to rest but love supper more. Ahead, the innyard is already alive. Hostler fussing over a mule. A boy sweeping yesterday into a tidy pile. A pot clucking on the hearth somewhere inside. You read the wall the way you read prices without numbers, decent wagons, well-shod horses, men whose cloaks have linings. This is not your economy. Inns are for people who can pay for a bed. Pay extra for the bed, not to include another snoring stranger. Pay extra for a fire. Pay extra for bedding, food, ale, stable, all separate lines on the invisible bill. And for many laborers the arithmetic simply didn't add up. You step back out of the yard like a tide receding from a rock. The stables, though, those speak your language, not the inn stables, with a host who would still charge you for the privilege of breathing near a mule. But the common barns that belong to someone wit. You follow the road to a farm on the village's shoulder and wait politely by the gate until someone in authority appears. A woman with wind-bitten cheeks and the kind of hands that can wring a chicken and a miracle at the same time sizes you up. You touch your cap and make the traveler's offer that has survived 1,000 seasons. A little help for a corner of the loft. Maybe a warm wall and a ladle of something spreadable. Historians still a. Today, the woman glances at the clouds, glances at your boots, and cuts a bargain with the efficiency of a millstone. Fork the muck, she says, and don't scare the cow. You step into the barn, and the world changes. The light is caramel. Dust motes lift and float as if they've been paid to dance. The air carries that honest perfume of straw, leather, and warm animal that your nose files under, not pretty, but true. The brown backs of cows rise and fall like small hills. A donkey blinks, unimpressed. A cat makes an executive sweep along the wall, signs off on your presence, and goes back to staffing the rodent department. You put your bundle where you can see it, then learn the pitchfork's grammar. Lift, turn, set, breathe. The work empties your head of all thoughts except the next forkful. You find a rhythm, and in giving you a job, the barn gives you permission to belong. When the floor looks like a floor again, you climb to the loft by a ladder that has known better days and worse feet. Up top, the straw is a continent. You pick a corner near a vent where fresh air is. Then you do the ancient ritual of the shakedown, literally shaking the straw into a shape that won't stab you in kidney and conscience. Quirky tidbit, that practice pulling down fresh straw for a makeshift bed gives English the later phrase, a shakedown, for sleeping on the floor. You keep your boots on for now, insurance against both cold and opportunists. Fluff your cloak into a pillow, and consider the problem of wildlife. There will be fleas. There will be lice. Somewhere in the barn's bylaws it probably stipulates that a traveler must contribute as. Will it work? Let's say it persuades more than it repels. The way a firm whisper persuades a stubborn child. Joke 1. Don't worry. The cat is running a strict only-you-can-prevent-mousefires program tonight. You eat in the dooryard, a hunk of yesterday's bread softened in a cup of thin ale, the kind that tastes like it's auditioning for better. The woman brings a ladle of pottage with a charitable potato in it, and you offer back the help of your shoulders when she rolls a barrel. This is the real currency. You don't have coins, but you have spine and time. Mainstream fact tucked into the steam. Many travelers, especially drovers and day laborers between hirings, slept in barns and byres, trading small chores for warmth and roof, while drovers with animals commonly chose the stable itself, because nothing says security deposit like a cow that knows your voice. Evening edges in. The donkey begins his slow-boiled kettle snore. A calf dreams hooves, twitching with the kind of gallop you envy. Sparrow talk trickles from the rafters. You curl into your corner, lay your staff where your hand can find it, and thread your belt through the strap of your bundle. So a tug on one tugs the other. You've learned from benches and porches that a thief is a genius of softness. Joke 2. You award this barn a 5-star rating, by which you mean you can see exactly 5 stars through the friendly holes in the roof. You think about the people who do choose the inn. There, you might have a bed, which means a wooden frame and a mattress filled with something that was once plant life and is now a parliament of things with legs. You might also have a bedfellow you did not previously know, a common practice that saves money and creates lifelong stories you will not, in fact, tell your grandchildren. The ale would be better, undeniably. The risk of your shoes walking away in the night, also better. Historians still argue whether alehouses less formal than inns, more neighborhood than highway were plentiful before the 16th century or blossomed later with regulation and demand. What your stomach knows is that tonight's budget has voted for the barn. Heat collects slowly, sympathetically. The animals are little stoves that exhale patience. You listen to the low talk of cows, a language of hay and old news, and you feel your eyelids agree to the terms. Before sleep, you make a quick inspection. No lanterns near straw, no candles at all. The cat accounted for. The latter close. You lay your hat brim down over your eyes to discourage inquisitive straw and overfamiliar mice. The floor below cracks like a knucklewood settling, not footsteps, and you let go. Joke 3. Free breakfast here means a gnat wandering into your mouth at dawn, but at least the service is punctual. Sometime in the night, a shower patters, roof answering in hollow applause. You wake to the soft panic of not knowing where you are, then remember, you are in the warm belly of a wooden animal, surrounded by beasts that understand the night better than you do. Relief arrives like a blanket. You adjust your cloak, punch your straw into indulgence, and think one thin thought about the way people like you zigzag between thresholds, porches for faith, barns for heat, hedges for privacy, and, when luck and latitude align, a friendly hearth corner. Mainstream aside, in many northern byre houses, people and animals truly shared walls and heat. A traveler folded into that arrangement was not an invasion, but an extra log on the human fire. Near dawn, you hear the farm wake in layers, the woman's clogs on packed earth, a bucket's shy ring, the creak of the pump, the sibilant whisper of flour on board, a baby issuing a carefully reasoned complaint. You climb down, roll your shoulders into their sockets, and hand back a morning's worth of labor. Turn the mill handle, carry the water, fetch the wood. Payment made. You get a cup of something hot that calls itself milk and almost pulls it off. You thank the woman with the grammar of bows and blessings that crosses every dialect. Historians still argue whether such barn stays were kindness, calculation, or a braided rope of both. You only know that last night you were a person with bones and a problem, and this barn solved it for 12 golden hours. Before you go, you scratch a tiny mark in a beam knot, a name, just a line among lines, a traveler's echo. You promise the cat that you'll speak well of management. Out by the gate, the inn's boar sign lifts its one tusk at you again, and you salute it back, free as air. The road lifts under your feet, which are persuaded to continue by the rumor that somewhere, ahead, a bakehouse warm as a sunrise will sell yesterday's bread for this morning's coin. Your cloak remembers straw. Your hair remembers barn perfume. Your heart remembers the quiet, forgiving glow of animal breath. Tonight might be another loft, or a hedge, or a fortune in bells, align something more official, with prayers and a ladle of ale. For now, you walk, fed, and a little straw stippled, and the day lets you belong to it. By midday the road slants toward stone and bell, and you know an abbey when you see one, even before the tower shoulders up, neat fish ponds like polished coins, an orchard keeping its own secrets, walls that look as if they were stacked by stubborn saints. The bell lifts a slow bronze syllable, none, or maybe a call to work, hand you, square your shoulders. Because asking a monastery for shelter is like knocking at fortune's door. You might meet kindness, Or you might meet a rule book in sandals. At the gatehouse, a slit opens, and a face appears. The porter, which is medieval for front desk, security, and weather report. He reads you the way the farm wife did, only with more theology. You tip your cap, mention the blisters. Mention St. Christopher, remember him from the porch. And you let your hat show what little it can. A crude pilgrim token pinned to the brim. Traded from a man who'd actually been to a shrine you only dream of. The porter's eyes soften one notch. Joke 1. This is the original captcha. Must identify all the squares that contain genuine poverty. He asks where you've come from, where you're headed, whether you're sick, whether you're trouble, and whether you'll swear not to light a fire, steal a spoon, or argue with the geese. Monasteries keep geese. Excellent alarms. Terrible conversational ists. Closing parenthesis. Then, if the house is in good fettle, he leads you beneath the arch and across a strip of shadow that smells of cool stone and damp rope. Mainstream historical fact, whispers underfoot, following the rule of Saint Benedict. Let all guests be received as Christ. Many monasteries maintained a hospitium or guest hall and an almonry at the gate, distributing bread, ale, and sometimes beds to travelers, with a practical distinction between honorable guests and the poor who stayed near the gate. You don't expect the noble guest wing, with feather beds and curtains. You are steered to the poor travelers lodging near the gatehouse, a long room with whitewashed walls, trestles folded away, pallets rolled like obedient dogs. A lay brother, sleeves flour dusted from bakery duty, invents a smile. Passes you a wooden tally that says you may eat at the guest table, and warns you very gently about the latrine, in terms that suggest personal experience. You stow your bundle where you can watch it, slide your belt through the strap, and breathe. The floor is swept, the roof is tight, and the smell is the honest temps of wool and humanity, not the chaotic opera of ruminants, though after last night, you almost miss the donkey's boiled kettle snore. Food happens at a signal you don't entirely understand, a little handbell, a soft stampede of sandals. You follow the smell of pottage and small beer to a room where talking is a controlled substance. Quirky tidbit. In many houses, monks used a form of sign language in the refectory to keep silence, quick, neat gestures for bread, salt, ale. Even for please pass the onions, which you vow to learn because it could save a friendship. A reader drones a life of a saint while you spoon barley and roots into the warm place under your ribs. And a lay brother glides by with the grave dignity of someone carrying the second best ladle. You're given a round of bread stamped with the house's device, a cup of ale that tastes like discipline more than delight, and a piece of cheese with a personality. You've known worse. You've been worse. You catch the steward's eye and ask whether there's wood to be split or a trench to be cleared in exchange for the pallet tonight. He nods toward the outer yard where chores breed like rabbits. Historians still argue whether monastic hospitality functioned primarily as charity, spiritual duty, wrapped in bread, or as social management, a way to vet and direct the restless poor without inviting them to stay. You're happy to be managed if it means your bones get too horizontal later. The Abbey's day runs on bells. Everything does. Prayer, work, rest, prayer again. You keep to the edges. A polite moth. You watch brothers scythe through tasks with the quiet choreography of a choir. You watch a scribe carry a page as if it weighs a soul. You watch the infirmary cross the yard with a basket of herbs that carry the road's green smell even inside the walls. Mainstream detail. If you're collecting them like badges, many monasteries maintained hospitals or hospices for the sick, poor, and for travelers, especially on busy routes, and the line between lodging and healing could be pleasantly blurry when your trouble was simply the exhaustion that wears a human face. The rules come with kindness. You learn them quickly. Compline closes the doors. You do not wander into the cloister. You do not rummage. You do not sing unless invited, and you are not invited. You may sleep one night, perhaps two, if the road has plainly chewed you and spat you onto their doorstep. But not three without a letter or a purpose with edges. In lean times, failed harvests, rumor of war, a cough that blows through the county, those limits tighten like a belt. The porter's look says, mercy is not infinite, but it is real. In the afternoon you split wood until the worry leaves your shoulders. You carry water to the brewhouse, where a brother with an expression like a friendly cabbage explains the difference between small ale and the kind they keep for feast days. And you pretend not to memorize the shelf where feast day lives. You help turn the malt with a rake that looks like a farm tool, disciplined by a bishop. Joke 2. You tell the brother your brewing experience consists of once trying to make soup and accidentally inventing glue. He assures you that glue is a respectable middle step. Your bed, when it arrives, is a pallet of straw inside a tidy frame, and you smile at the familiarity. You shake it down with the same ceremony as in the barn. Mutter a charm of pennyroyal you're not sure is technically approved by the abbot, and lay your cloak with the practiced fold of a person who knows a wrinkle in the wrong place will wake you like a trumpet. For company you have a man with a scallop shell badge stitched to his hat, Santiago Pilgrim, or a lover of seafood, hard to say, and a tinker whose tools clink in his dreams. You place your staff where your hand will find it, more out of habit than fear. The walls themselves feel like a guarantee, and yet limits show through the weave. You see the men turned away at dusk when numbers run high, the porter handing bread over the threshold and pointing them toward a village barn with a note for the reeve. The abbey is not a bottomless purse. It is a place that practices a difficult balance, receiving Christ at the door while keeping the monks from drowning in guests. Historians still argue whether most houses, especially in the later Middle Ages, maintained generous open hospitality or shifted to stricter gatekeeping as poor laws hardened and resources thinned. Either way, a traveler learns to arrive before the bell and to carry a story that fits inside a porter's patience. After Compline, the dark folds into the corridors like a cat returning to its warm chair. You lie on your pallet and trace the day in the grain of the ceiling. Somewhere a night brother passes with a lantern. Somewhere a psalm is finishing the work of smoothing the air. You think of the chapel porch where stone loaned you its shelter, of the barn loft where straw taught you its math, and now of this guest hall where rules and kindness share a pillow. Joke 3. If you ever open your own monastery, you'll call it the Quiet Snore and give the porter a medal for actuarial courage. Dawn comes on little paws. You help stack firewood. You carry a basket to the almonry, where bread is handed out to the queue already patient at the gate, and you catch the small miracle of order. Everyone receives something. Nobody gets to argue with the tally. And the bell keeps score. You offer thanks in the awkward dialect of gratitude that needs no translator. The porter stamps your chit and hands you back the road with a look that says, "We helped. You helped. Now go in peace before the geese wake up." Outside the arch, the world widens again, fish ponds blinking. Orchard clearing its throat. The tower bidding you a stern but fond farewell. You adjust your bundle, feel the square comfort of monastery bread against your ribs, and step back into the mathematics of miles. You carry the echo of chant in your ears, the memory of clean straw under your bones, and the understanding that hospitality is a bridge with a toll in courtesy and time. It held you tonight. It might hold you again. But you won't lean on it as if it were forever, because nothing on the road is forever except the road. You leave the abbey while the bell is still rinsing the air. A square of monk bread in your pouch, and the porter's calm, "Go in peace," riding behind you like a discreet escort. The road exhales. Fields open their ribs. Hedges fold and unfold like green stitching. Somewhere a brook practices for its role as your evening musician. You walk into the plain democracy of the commons, the edges of villages, where people graze cows, shake rugs, gossip, and, when the light thins, pretend not to notice a traveler taking the measure of a hedge. You are that traveler, and you measure like a tailor of sleep. A hedge first. Hawthorn and hazel, woven by a hedge layer's art so tight it turns wind into a rumor. You choose the lee side, where grass is a little longer, and test the ground with your staff the way you learned to test bread for a hollow crumb. Dry enough, you unroll your cloak, otherwise known as your two-season tent. The 2 seasons being damp and very damp, and start the old choreography. Staff planted. Rope from your bundle to a low branch. Cloak pegged at 2 corners with sticks. The other edge folded under you as insurance against sneaky drafts. A bow bunk, improvised to the polite applause of Sparrow's quirky tidbit. Fern fronds make decent mattressing if you lay them all with the stems pointing one way. Reverse the stems and you'll spend the night getting reviewed by very opinionated botanical needles. A boy drives a few geese across the green, and you instinctively salute, because after last night's monastery you've learned respect for the long-necked security service. He stares at your small operation, then at your blister-polished boots, and you give him the universal sign for no trouble, just tired, palms open, shoulders down, face with all the sharpness filed off. He whistles the geese onward. Here on the common, nobody owes you a bed, but nobody owns the air either. Mainstream historical fact. English and other European villages maintained commons, shared lands for pasture, fuel, or markets where travelers often paused, watered animals, and rested on the edges. While not formal lodgings, such spaces functioned as the soft shoulder of the road for people with more road than coin. The sun leans west. Your hedge tent purrs with the small talk of insects, and the grass gives you its cool. You inventory your bites fewer since the pennyroyal routine. Thank you, backyard apothecary, and nibble the corner of monk bread with the respect due to something that will outlast empires. There's a stone at your back that warms slowly. A patient stove. A dog sniffs you, decides you are not currently edible, and leaves you a brief report on neighborhood politics. Joke 1. You review the hedge on an imaginary traveler's ledger. Excellent windbreak. Acceptable privacy. Prickles included at no extra charge. Breakfast not included unless you count the occasional gnat. When the green starts to fold into evening, you consider an upgrade. Ruined wall, where a Roman villa once kept accounts, or a Norman grange once hoarded grain. Now a half-height rectangle of stone holds on to heat, like memory. You relocate, because that wall, even broken, promises what you need most: a back, a corner, a story that has outlived its landlord. Historians still argue whether commoners casually helped themselves to the shelter of ruins, or whether lords and parishes policed such places tightly. Your experience is that stone is generous until someone sees you using it, and then stone becomes controversial. You tuck yourself in anyway, cloak folded into order, staff within reach, bundle looped to belt your standard anti-theft waltz. Across the lane, a market cross lifts its little roof on stout posts, one of those buttercross shelters where, on fair days, cheese and eggs make their oaths in public. Tonight the square is quiet, but the roof would keep the dew off. You've slept under such crosses before. Upright stones at your head. The sky trimmed neatly into triangles by the beams. Mainstream note. Covered market crosses or butter crosses survive in many towns. While primarily trading shelters, they doubled for human needs when the heavens had strong opinions. You decide the wall is warmer, though the cross gets points for medieval curb appeal. As the last vendors pack up their baskets, A woman with a lopsided smile pauses to ask if you'll watch her sack while she chases a chicken with a poor sense of destiny. You nod, because errands like this knit you to a place long enough to be safe. She returns, chicken persuaded, and slips you an onion with a conspirator's wink. Rub it on your ankles, she says. Midges don't like saints or onions. You will smell like devout salad, but you take the counsel. Quirky tidbit number 2, honorary. Some travelers swore by goose grease or soot as a skin sealant against bites. Onions are friendlier to laundry. Night presses its friendly thumb on the world. You review your rules for sleeping in the open. Feet toward the path so you feel footsteps, not faces. Stones gathered to keep your cloak edge pinned. Fire only if you're at the edge of the green with permission and a pot to make it respectable. No singing unless the stars specifically request a madrigal. Joke 2. You promise yourself you'll write a popular guide one day. 50 Shades of Shade, a peasant snapping atlas with detailed ratings for hedges, ruins, and possibly hollow trees with non-negotiable owls. You drift, wake, drift again. An owl reports the news in its local edition. Somewhere a fox auditions for a ballad. Your stomach, sensing the onion, decides to hold a candlelight vigil. You press your hand to the stone at your back and feel it still giving off day. This is why a ruin beats a hedge. The stone remembers heat and returns it like a tiny inheritance. You keep your ears up for the village watch. Mainstream facts shadow. Since the Statute of Winchester 1285 in England, many towns maintained watch and ward systems curfews. Night watch, hue and chryso nightwalkers could be challenged. If a watchman appears, your story is ready. Day labor, monastery bread, chit, willing hands. The watch likes stories that come with chores. A breeze stirs, and your cloak shifts its attitude. You repeg, adjust, mutter something soothing to the corner of the fabric that insists on behaving like a dramatic actor. Not far away, a drover's horn murmurs cattle are bedding down at a stance along the road. If you were lucky, you'd be near one of those designated stopping grounds. A strip of common where herds could rest, ringed by temporary hurdles. With a fire legal by custom, and a water trough that knows the songs of all seasons, historians still argue whether the network of such stances and greens was formal enough to call a system, or simply a long improvisation tuned by centuries. Either way, you learn to look for signs. Churned turf, the smell of yesterday's bovine dreams, a pile of bracken that remembers shoulders. You wake once to rain that can't make up its mind. Your cloak, having opinions, conducts a brief, moist seminar. The ruined wall keeps its oath though, and the wet gives up. You think of the barn cat with the strict rodent policy, of the monastery geese with their robust litigation strategy, and you grant the hedge a medal for quiet competence. Joke 3. If you had a patron saint of naps, you'd commission a tiny wax figure yawning and leave it at the next chapel, but you suspect even saints have boundaries. By gray dawn, you are a little stiff, a little dew-dusted, and vastly alive. A woman sweeping the buttercross nods at you, as if you were a misplaced bench. You nod back, part of the furniture until you move. You fold your cloak with the neatness of a soldier making peace with fabric, shake the fern crumbs out, and rub a little onion where your ankles plan to make friends they don't need. Your breakfast is monk bread and a hopeful search for yesterday's market crumbs, which the sparrows have comprehensively audited. You drink from the pump and thank the handle for being faithful all night in your imagination. Before you go, you look back at your temporary room, the hedge that coached the wind into manners, the wall that remembered the sun, the little roof under which commerce and shelter share a handshake. None of it belongs to you, and yet all of it held you the way a palm holds water for a scorched mouth. That's the secret curriculum of the road. Learn the shapes that love people, hedges, walls, roofs on four-post sand, love them back with care, quiet, and the courtesy of disappearing by sunrise. You shoulder your bundle, which is beginning to feel like a small opinionated relative, and step onto the track while the village is still yawning. A rooster explains the morning to everyone, in case anyone missed the memo. Your feet remember the hedge, your back remembers the wall, and your nose remembers the onion, which may or may not be keeping the midges respectful, but will certainly keep conversation brisk. Somewhere ahead there are new thresholds, some sold by hosts, some lent by saints, some stitched by shrubs. You follow the road's long sentence, comma by comma, until the next place offers you a period. Toward late afternoon, the road starts collecting people the way a river gathers driftwood, and you learn the oldest lodging trick of all. Don't sleep alone if you can help it. A tinker falls in beside you first, tools clinking like a pocket full of wind chimes. Then, a widow with a basket and two solemn children who look at you the way owls look at dusk. Then, a carter, easing his nag and pretending not to be grateful for conversation. Companionship is a lock you build out of voices. You all trade headlines: which village has bread, which reeve hates strangers, which meadow is generous with dry ground and stingy with midges. The tinker swears he knows a stance where drovers stop that kind of grassy lay-by with water and a fire pit that the locals pretend doesn't exist until their own cattle need a night out. At the next fork, an old man seated on a stump runs an unofficial newsroom. He has opinions about every milestone in 3 counties. Don't take the lower way, he warns. Bandits. You look at his stick, at his single shoe, at the way his eyes track your bundle like a cat, considering a moral lapse, and you weigh rumor against the sky. Historians still argue whether roads were as murderously dangerous as ballads make them, or whether most danger was the small, shabby kind, petty theft, a shove in the dark, a bedfellow who leaves lighter than he arrived. You decide the old man is not wrong, exactly just tuned to the key of caution. The group keeps to the ridgeline where wind keeps secrets poorly. By twilight you find the drover's ground, churned turf like a deliberate mess, a trough shyly half full, a ring of stones declaring fire lives here when law nods yes. The carter produces a flint, the tinker produces bravado, sparks consent, and soon you have the tame miracle of flame, legal by custom, and hallowed by the presence of 3 moderately judgmental cows. You edge your cloak toward the heat with the care of a diplomat. Mainstream fact settles in with the smoke, droving moving herds to Marketran on a lattice of customary stopping places, stances in greens where herds slept inside, a loose fence of hurdles and men slept just outside with staffs across their knees. Not inns, exactly, but not lawless either. They were the road's memory made visible. The widow's children watch you rub the onion on your ankles with interest. Saints and salads, you explain, because bedtime demands folklore. The tinker nods solemnly and adds piniroll to the fire for the scent, the way you did in Barnes. He claims the smoke keeps midges unambitious. Quirky tidbit. Some tinkers and peddlers wore little clusters of bits their music, so that if a hand moved among their tools at night, the world would tinkle its disapproval. He arranges his own kit in a bedtime halo that will sing if kicked. You set your staff where your hand can find it without asking questions. The carter tells a story about a highwayman who apologized after the robbery and returned a keepsake, because he wasn't a monster, just a professional. Joke 1. You suggest perhaps the man was part of a union with a very thoughtful code of conduct. The carter says yes. Local 24 courtesy cup verses. Everyone laughs the way tired people do, soft at the edges, grateful for permission. Laughter is shelter too. As dark climbs the hedges, the talk turns to papers. The widow has a letter with a curling seal from her cousin in the next shire, proof she walks with a purpose and a place. You have nothing but your hat-pin saint and your open face. She warns you that the last village had a beadle who loved the sound of the word vagrant and would happily make a song of it. Mainstream historical fact. Warm as the fire. In England, the Statute of Cambridge, 1388, and later poor laws tried to tether laborers to parishes and sort the impotent poor from the sturdy beggars, breeding a bureaucracy of you listen to the fire and decide that tomorrow you will borrow the widow's courage and the tinker's volume. The cows lie down like ships at anchor. The children droop. The carter arranges his nag's nose rope, so it will tug his wrist if she wanders. You take first watchhold habit from nights with benches and gisand. Study the road's glimmer between hedges. The moon has the color of good cheese. Joke 2. You congratulate yourself on still smelling faintly of monastery bread and strongly of onion, which probably means neither bandit nor romance will bother you tonight. The tinker snores like a kettle, considering its options. You feel the boundary between your bones and the ground blur into an amiable handshake. Somewhere after midnight, a figure approaches the edge of firelight and freezes, both hands out for the universal sign of, I am not a wolf. It's a pilgrim, shell stitched to his cap, that same scallop you saw in your pallet mate at the Abbey. He asks in the careful way of a man who has been told no more than once whether he may warm his hands. You make room, because heat wants company. He tells you the next town has a hospice on the edge, and the rule is 1 night if you're quiet, and 2 if you arrive before the bell. He also tells you the market cross there has a roof shaped like a hat, and the best gossip in 3 deaneries. You think fondly of the butter cross you didn't sleep under, and decide that roofs on 4 posts are your new favorite heraldry. Before sleep, you count the risks like sheep. Watchmen with cudgels and questions. Lads with more beer than sense. A reeve who thinks travel itself is a kind of insolence. A fever creeping around the county that makes stores cautious. The earnest law against being poor in public. And always, always, the weather with its claim on your cloak. Historians still argue whether people like you seasonal workers, peddlers, menders, wayfarers by grindstone, or devotion moved mostly within tight little circuits of familiar markets or wandered long ribbons across half a kingdom. You suspect the truth is a plate. Most people kept near, some roved far, and you do both depending on coins, rumors, and the road's mood. Dawn wakes you with the gentle slap of a cow's tail against your sleeve. Your first thought is gratitude. Your second, inventory. Your third, breakfast. Joke 3. You declare yesterday's crust, lightly rewarmed over the fire, to be artisan toast, and the children reward you with the solemn joy only children can deliver to a joke that isn't strictly funny. You share the last of the monk bread, and the pilgrim shares a story about a church where the porch months ago held 5 travelers and 1 goose that refused to choose a denomination. You raise your cup to geese everywhere, the monasteries, the villages, the boys' squadron on the green, because security comes in many feathers. On the way out, the carter teaches you a trick with your belt. Loop it through your bundle, but also through the notch in your staff, so a tug on one wakes the other. You thank him like he just taught you fire. The widow takes the lower lane. Saint's letter in her fist like a talisman. The tinker veers toward a village that sounds like pots kneading voices. The pilgrim lopes ahead at that steady prayer-foot cadence. You choose the ridge again, because rumor is a weather peer. You read it, and you adjust your cloak. As you walk, you think of last night's stitched together. The chapel's porch, the barn's breath, the hedge's manners, the ruin's memory, the stance's circle of stones, the brief bureaucratic kindness of the monastery. No door owes you a welcome, no wall owes you a corner. Yet the world has repeatedly failed to be cruel enough to make you stop. That, you decide, is the real lodging, the way strangers, customs, beasts, and even ruins give you little squares of safety long enough to close your eyes. You carry that knowledge like a talisman. You don't need to rub for it to work. And now the road grows quieter, and your steps grow softer, and every place you've paused begins to fold itself like careful cloth, tucked back into the chest of the night. The porch eases into shadow again, its bench cool and empty, a good secret kept. The barn settles, patient animals breathing their little clouds of warmth. The cat making one last round and curling into a punctuation mark. The hedge remembers the weight of your back and lets the wind through in thinner threads. The ruined wall sighs out the last of yesterday's sun and becomes simply stone, which is another word for memory that refuses to hurry. You pass the buttercross and lift your eyes to the small roof propped on posts. It holds nothing now but the dawn's first faint gold, which is, somehow, everything. The monastery bell rings from far away, a single drop of bronze on the quiet tongue of the air, and the sound seems to bless not only the sleepers within the walls, but the sleepers outside them. The travelers under their cloaks, the drovers by their fires, the widow with her letter, the tinker encircled by his cautious music. Even the geese, grumpy and indignant as ever, are drowsy punctuation at the edges of a long sentence that has, at last, decided to rest. You breathe, and the breath stays. Your shoulders lower. Your shoes loosen their complaint, and let your feet become simply warm again. Imagine the saint on your hat, lifting one broad hand, not to command, but to reassure. For this moment, you are kept. The road will still be there in the morning, and the sky will still have an opinion, and your cloak will still try to behave like weather. But now the air is slow and friendly, and the world is soft as straw, and the only task left is the easiest one, to drift, kindly, toward sleep, the way a leaf drifts toward a quiet bank, touching down so lightly you barely notice when you have arrived.